Several Chinese engineers killed in a bus explosion in Pakistan. Before the accident, they had been working for Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. 11 countries are carrying out a joint military exercise in Australian waters. Nearby, a Chinese spy ship has been spotted. The U.S. strengthens measures to counter Chinese telecom companies. A nearly $2 billion program is on the way to reimburse American companies for removing Chinese equipment, including that from Huawei. 67 Falun Gong practitioners have died because of the Chinese regime's persecution in the first half of this year alone. Nearly 10,000 more were detained or harassed by Chinese police. And an eyewitness says the Chinese regime made a sophisticated industry of state-sanctioned organ harvesting. That says Beijing for years has flip-flopped on whether it takes and sells organs from executed prisoners. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Several Chinese engineers working for Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative killed in a bus explosion in Pakistan. They were working on a nearby dam project and several other projects. Lucy Fielder reports.
More than a dozen people, including Chinese nationals and Pakistani soldiers, were killed in a blast targeting a bus in a remote region of northern Pakistan on Wednesday. That's according to multiple sources who said the toll could rise. It was not immediately clear whether the blast was the result of a roadside device or something planted inside the bus. Inspector General Muazzam Jah Ansari said the bus plunged into a ravine. Bomb disposal experts were at the scene, and police were investigating what he said looked like sabotage. Beijing condemned the blast and asked Pakistan to punish the perpetrators and protect the safety of Chinese personnel, institutions and projects. A senior administrative officer of the Hazara region said the bus was carrying more than 30 Chinese engineers to the site of the Dasu Dam in Upper Kohistan. The Dasu hydroelectric project is part of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is a $65 billion investment plan. It falls under Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, aimed at connecting Western China to the Gwadar seaport in southern Pakistan.
Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative is a controversial global infrastructure project. It has been criticized for trapping developing countries under heavy debt. The government of Pakistan has been involved in the project for many years now. In 2020, they signed $11 billion worth of projects with Beijing. Earlier this year, business newspaper The Economic Times reported that because of the project, Pakistan is overwhelmed by debt to China. As Cuban citizens take to the streets in protests against the communist regime, a famous Chinese influencer is making false claims about their motives, claiming their actions instead show support for communist rule. Chinese netizen Gu Yanmu Chen has more than 6 million followers on Chinese social media platform Weibo. The microblogging website is often considered China's version of Twitter. Mu Chen is known for her staunch support of Chinese authorities and her anti-American stance. She also writes articles published by state-run media outlets like the Global Times. On Monday, she posted a video showing Cuban protesters, along with the caption, "The Cubans are on the street in support of their president." They are protesting against the far-right opposition agents who are bought off by the U.S. and who try to destroy social stability. But a Chinese dissident disagreed, commenting on Twitter that it was clearly the people of 32 cities taking to the streets, protesting against the dictatorship of the Cuban Communist Party. But when the news came to the CCP, they turned it into a demonstration of the people in support of the Cuban Communist Party and against the United States. Adding that, how shameless does someone have to be to lie through their teeth like that? It's back. A Chinese spy ship has once again been spotted just outside Australian waters near Queensland, Australia. That's where 11 countries are carrying out a joint military exercise Wednesday. It's called the biannual Talisman Sabre Joint Exercise, operated by Australia and the United States. Japan, the UK, New Zealand, and Canada are also participating. This year, South Korea is joining for the first time, while France, India, Germany, and Indonesia will observe. The major exercise seems to have caught Beijing's attention. It sent Chinese intelligence gathering vessel Tianwangxing, which translates to Uranus, reportedly to monitor the situation. The same ship has also shown up near previous Australia-US military exercises. Back in 2019, Australia's Prime Minister told Australian radio station 2SM that he is wary of the ship's presence as the country hosts the joint exercise. The exercise will run until July 31st and involve 17,000 troops. Activities include amphibious landings, maritime operations, and air combat. Recently, Australia-China relations have come under serious strain. That's after Canberra called for an independent probe into the origins of the CCP virus, known as COVID-19 last year. Beijing soon retaliated, slapping restrictions on billions of dollars of Australian exports. The U.S. is strengthening measures to counter Chinese telecom companies. The U.S. Federal Communications Commissioner, or FCC, voted unanimously Tuesday on a $1.9 billion program to reimburse American telecommunications companies for removing Chinese equipment. Last year, Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE were deemed national security threats. The government ordered American companies to remove their equipment from American telecommunications infrastructure. The acting FCC chairwoman said the equipment could be manipulated, disrupted, or controlled by foreign actors. She said the quest to root out all such equipment is a daunting task for the FCC. Its newest order expands the companies eligible for reimbursement from those with 2 million or fewer customers to those with 10 million or fewer customers. The FCC also bars equipment from Chinese companies Hytera, Hikvision, and Dahua. The Hong Kong Book Fair is making a comeback this week after being canceled last year due to the pandemic. But authorities are warning against displaying what they call subversive or separatist books. How is the new national security law going to affect this year's book fair? Olivia Chen reports.
For the first time since the Hong Kong Book Fair began in 1990, veteran publisher Jimmy Pang will not display any political books at his booth. The book fair, which draws about 1 million visitors each year, was cancelled last year due to the global health crisis. It resumes this week under the shadow of a new national security law. Authorities have warned against, quote, subversive or separatist books, too vaguely defined crimes.
For so many years, from the first book fair that I participated in until now, this year's fair is the most perilous one. In the past, we had no such worries, but this time our self-censorship is so serious.
Pang would have liked to display a book that documents Hong Kong's youngest protesters and A Sea of People by Claudia Mo, a former legislator who was arrested under the new law and denied bail. But he decided against it and said he wanted to, quote, avoid trouble. Another publisher, Raymond Young, said editors were instructed to follow certain red line or regulations. In one of his new books, he blurred out the logo of Hong Kong newspaper Apple Daily in an illustration. The pro-democracy tabloid printed its last edition in June, after police froze its assets and arrested its executives in a national security probe.
There are other 3 books that we want to display here, but they are banned by the printers already. So they have already done some kind of censorship for us. Like they feel that actually the content may not be safe, that they do not want to take risks because of the Apple Daily incident.
The government's Trade Development Council, the organizer of the fair, said books would not go through a vetting or censorship process. But exhibitors had to be, quote, self-disciplined.
Coming up, 67 Falun Gong practitioners died because of the CCP's persecution. Just in the first half of this year alone, nearly 10,000 were detained or harassed by Chinese police. More on that after the break.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.
A new report on the death toll of China's human rights abuses. In the first half of this year, 67 Falun Gong practitioners died because of persecution by the Chinese Communist Party. That's according to U.S.-based Falun Gong information website minghui.org. Data released on the site also notes nearly 10,000 Falun Gong practitioners were detained or harassed by Chinese police. The incidents happened in nearly every province and region across the country. The oldest among them is 94 years old, with the youngest only 12. Nearly 800 of them are over 65, and more than 100 have had their pensions withheld. Those affected come from all walks of life in society, from civil servants to professors and university teachers, doctors, lawyers, journalists, engineers, policemen, students, and housewives. Falun Gong is a spiritual meditation practice that teaches the core principles of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance. The Chinese Communist regime has suppressed Falun Gong since 1999. That's out of fear that its widespread popularity would promote free thinking and morality, values that contradict communist rule. The Chinese regime has flip-flopped over the years on whether it takes organs from executed prisoners and sells them. Now, an eyewitness says it didn't just happen. The regime has formed a sophisticated industry behind it, and Beijing could be using the system against other groups. NTD's Penny Zhou reports.
For decades, Chinese authorities have been obtaining organs from executed prisoners and selling them to patients. Human rights activists and medical experts have long condemned the practice, but the Chinese regime did not admit to it until 2005. That was when even more serious allegations emerged that Beijing is forcibly harvesting organs from prisoners of conscience. An authoritative independent tribunal says it is still happening to this day. Now an eyewitness is coming forward. He shares with NTD how Chinese authorities built a sophisticated industry selling prisoners' organs, often without consent from the individuals or their families.
I personally witnessed batches of death row prisoners being shot.
This man used to be a police officer in China. He worked in the northern city of Zhengzhou from 1996 to 1999. NTD met him in the U.S., where he now resides. We hid his face and distorted his voice to protect his identity.
And after getting shot, they were taken to a white van that was already waiting nearby. The van looks pretty similar to an ambulance. Then their organs will be taken out in the van. That's something I saw with my own eyes.
He says the system involves cooperation with Chinese hospitals. They would help match blood types between the patients and the prisoners. The police force and the court system are also involved in the industry.
The judges must have informed the hospital the location of the execution. Otherwise, they would not have known in advance where it was or which prisoner's organ is to be removed. Their goal is very clear. Once the execution is carried out, someone will quickly carry the body to the ambulance for an autopsy. Not everybody will get an autopsy. The division of labor is very clear. The people in the van are very clear which organs to remove, so this is all prearranged.
The man says the detention centers that host death row inmates are also part of the industry.
Once the death sentence is announced, the prison officials will arrange 1 or 2 prisoners to provide 24/7 personal protection for the person to be executed and take really good care of him. That's to prevent any accidents from happening to him. They would do physical checks and assess his blood type and physical and mental conditions. Usually at this time, they already have a basic idea whether this person's organs will be removed. At the same time, they would be looking for an organ recipient.
And when the execution day comes, the doctor will give the prisoner an injection. The doctor will tell him it's for sedation or reducing pain.
But in fact, the injection is meant for preventing his blood from clotting, to prevent possible damages to his organs after the person was shot and the blood circulation suddenly stops.
The former officer says the practice is a semi-public industry chain in China.
I became a police officer in 1996, and the organ removal continued until 1998 when I left the job. Judging from how shrewd and smooth the procedure went at the scene, I believe this is not something they just started 1 or 2 years before. It's been going on for quite long. They have formed an industry chain out of it.
He says after the executions, the bodies were mixed together and taken directly to the crematorium. The families were often given a box of ashes that may not even belong to their family member, and no one knew about organ harvesting. The ethical concerns aren't just about how China treats its prisoners. For decades, many people in the West have been traveling to China for organ transplant. It's called organ tourism, like this interview in a 2017 PBS report.
So, urged by family and friends, he went to China's capital, Beijing, in 2006. Within 1 week, he received a new kidney. He says he paid $10,000 for the transplant.
And it raises the question, has the world been facilitating organ harvesting by providing patients and profits to China? So far, only Israel, Italy, Taiwan, and Spain are barring their citizens from traveling to China for organ transplants. Beijing claims it has stopped using organs from executed prisoners since 2015. Whether that's true or not, many argue the regime continues to use that practice to profit from persecuting Falun Gong practitioners. Now, the same approach is suspected to be used against Uyghur Muslims in the Xinjiang region. And it remains a question whether the CCP will expand the practice to target more groups as the world stays silent about it. Penny Zhou, NTD News.
The CCP seems to be scaling up its spirit of struggle. The party's Central Commission for Discipline Inspection published an editorial on its website on Monday titled "Dare to Fight and Dare to Win." The term struggle appeared over 40 times in the article. The title comes from CCP leader Xi Jinping's speech at the party's centennial earlier this month. The article states that the CCP is engraved with the marks of struggle since its birth, and it has been striving for survival and development through struggle. It also states that the party relied on struggle not only before seizing power, but also during economic reforms. The article adds that be persistent in struggles, be unremitting in struggles, and advance forward in struggles. These are the distinct characteristics of the Chinese communists. The editorial goes on to say if a party, a country, or a team loses the will to struggle, it will soon perish. Commentator Li Yuqian from US-based Chinese language news outlet ApolloNet is commenting on it. He says this editorial reveals that no matter how the CCP disguises itself, its essential philosophy of struggle has never changed. Li says this article should alarm the world and make the world realize that any illusion about the CCP should be discarded. It's not the first time a CCP leader has boasted their so-called spirit of struggle. As early as the 1920s, CCP leader Mao Zedong has said that a revolution is not a dinner party, or writing an essay, or painting a picture, or doing embroidery. It cannot be so refined, so leisurely and gentle, so temperate, kind, courteous, restrained and magnanimous. A revolution is an insurrection, an act of violence by which one class overthrows another. 17 people died when a hotel collapsed in eastern China on Monday. Rescue work ended on Wednesday. The hotel was in Suzhou City, Jiangsu Province. An investigation found an altering of the hotel structure caused it to collapse. The building had been used as a hotel for 15 years. Local residents say the building is over 20 years old. It had a total of 54 rooms. The part of the building that collapsed was 3 stories tall. In recent years, the hotel has undergone several renovations. The first floor was still being renovated when it collapsed. One local resident said the building used to have only 3 floors, but over the years they have been adding extra floors. Besides, a former manager of the hotel said when the hotel took the building over in 2018, he found that the main building and the auxiliary building were spliced together, and he saw cracks on the wall connecting them. A hotel guest who checked out just before the hotel collapsed spoke of loud drilling noises and the sound of the shoveling of sand. The guest said the building was shaking. This isn't the first time for a building in China to collapse. Last year, about 30 people died after a hotel collapsed in Fujian province. Chinese state media reported serious problems in the construction. This hotel was used to quarantine CCP virus patients. Also last year, part of an elementary school in the northeastern city of Shenyang collapsed, resulting in 2 injuries. Some Chinese residents call such buildings with poor construction tofu projects. Suzhou City is about 60 miles west of Shanghai. It's a popular tourist destination and an important business center in China. A rare sight, a river in central China has turned red after rainfall. It happened in the city of Enshi in Hubei province on Monday. Locals were surprised and filmed it. The red water was seen running down from a mountain. Local media also reported on the rare sight, and relevant authorities are investigating. The day before, heavy rain hit the city, and authorities issued a red warning. And that's all for today's China in Focus. But before you go, be sure to check out our latest special report. This month marks the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party's founding. But as accusations of human rights abuses grow, one question often crops up: why the Chinese people don't just revolt against the Chinese Communist Party? One important factor is fear, imprinted onto Chinese people's hearts through decades of bloodshed caused by the CCP.
In fact, its fundamental purpose of the killing is to create and maintain an atmosphere of fear, and then use this fear to maintain its rule so that the people don't dare to resist or oppose the CCP.
In this special report, we look at the grueling facts about that killing and even human cannibalism, and why experts warn the world should watch out for the spread of communism, or else risk the same tragedies that happen in mainland China striking in their own backyards. Be sure to check it out on Epoch TV this Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. China in Focus is partnering with the platform. That's where you can watch our exclusive content every Friday night. To subscribe, click epochtv.com/ChinaInFocus. Thanks for watching, and see you tomorrow.